essentially the same thing he's doing here.
I'm not familiar with Senator Harbison's. Many of us here have been working on this for a long time.
Right.
There's a multitude of versions. So I'm not familiar, Representative, but I will tell you that if you look at all our bordering states, so Alabama to your west exempts all military retirement insurance. And of course, Tennessee and Florida have no state income tax. North Carolina has now exempted all military retirement income. And to our east, across our river, we've got South Carolina, which has a $17,500 exemption, more similar to this. But I can't speak to that particular bill. I'm sorry.
Chairman Stevens. Chairman Stevens waived. So are there any other further questions from members of the committee? Chairman Blackman?
Thank the author of the bill, and certainly thank Governor Kemp and his support of our military through this legislation. And I know we're awaiting a fiscal note, which will be getting soon, and we'll look at this. But I think it honors our heroes, servicemen and women appropriately in retirement. I would like to ask the author if there's any leeway or consideration if we did look at that second earned income component offline, and see if there's a way to work it in an up to statute, perhaps.
Chairman, I would look forward to those conversations.
Thank you.
I'd like to do that. And I would emphasize, meant to mention that the fiscal note, we do have, we pretty much know what it will be. And we have some good, reliable sources get this, even though we don't have the official note back. This is basically anywhere from 53 on the low end to a $60 million fiscal bill.
Chairman Petrie, as you're aware, we trust it verified.
Oh, I
So we do need to, and I'm just joking, because this committee and as does the entire general assembly stands in full support of our military servicemen and women in the state of Georgia, and thank them for their present and past service. And I too commend Governor Kemp and his efforts to do the right thing by these men and women. Thank you for your efforts of bringing this bill. We look forward to getting that fiscal note and continuing to follow up. No other questions, meeting adjourned.
I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. I'm going to say a word of blessing here, and we can go ahead and get started. Let's all bow. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the blessing you've bestowed upon us, Lord. Lord, give us the guidance and the wisdom to do your will today, Lord. Lord, I ask that you continue to lead, guide, and direct us. We ask all this in your Heavenly Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, here we go. We're on the road to making it through the session, and this is our second full committee. I apologize for being out last week. Had a little bit of run-in with some sort of virus just running around. I do want to recognize a friend of mine from South Georgia. We got Superior Court Judge Burt Guy here in the room. I appreciate you coming. We've got two bills on the calendar here today. We're going to hear House Bill 1134, and then we're going to hear Senate Bill 226. We've got a quorum in place, and so I'm going to call Chairman F. Stration to present his bill, House Bill 1134, and present from right there, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, it's an honor to be before you today. I, too, want to say hello to Superior Court Judge Burt Guy, who's with us today. Honored to have you here with us, Judge. There are no coincidences, and it just seems the chance to get to present with you here is real special today. And so I appreciate having you, Judge, and I look forward to talking with you further after the meeting. I want to begin by just talking about the gang problem that we have. It's something that states around the country are facing right now, but it's a critically important issue that we address here in the state of Georgia. I just came from a Joint Commission meeting with the governor, attorney general, first lady, the department heads of many of the state's law enforcement departments, really discussing the critical needs that we have in Georgia to ensure comprehensive response to gang issues. And Mr. Chairman, if I could just, if you'll indulge me, maybe I'd like to talk in detail about the gang problem that we have in the state.
Please do.
So it's really a shock to learn that near 60% of all violent crime in Georgia is in some way gang related. And when you really think about that, that's a shocking number. We have seen that in our state prison system, 14,000 inmates, I believe that corresponds to about 30% of the prison population, have a noted gang affiliation. Just at the meeting I just attended, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Juvenile Justice said that when a child enters confinement in the juvenile justice system, if that child has no prior gang affiliation, within 48 hours, that child will be approached about joining a gang within a DJJ facility. So the pervasive issue with respect to gang crime and gang involvement is something that is a serious challenge for our state. Governor Kemp's leadership allowed for prioritization of investigating gang crimes, and under the direction of GBI Director Vic Reynolds, the GBI has established an anti-gang task force. And that's really critical here, Mr. Chairman, because the training and specialization required for effective investigations in this field is, I would classify as unique. It's different from other types of crimes, and the need to be able to interpret and understand tagging, the other specific knowledge that these investigators have to have, which I don't have all that knowledge, but that is critical as these cases are being investigated. What we've also seen is when crimes occur in prisons that are gang related, that can be an incredible workload for a local DA's office. So the responsibility of prosecuting those offenses, and I know members of the committee may know this, but I'm a former felony prosecutor myself. And in the circuit where I served, there was a state prison, and I'm familiar with the difficulty of receiving a file, maybe an investigation's taking place from a violent crime that occurred within the prison system, and potentially the defendant charged has already been sentenced to an extended sentence. and to really get to the bottom of what occurred and what the appropriate means of prosecution would be, to procure the witnesses necessary for that prosecution. I mean, these are all really daunting challenges. And so in light of the significance of the connection to violent crime, the workload that falls on our district attorneys who maybe have one prison or several prisons within his or her judicial circuit, the responsibility of investigators to bring these cases to prosecutors, and then the workload corresponding by those prosecutors, I think it necessitates that we take some sort of action here. And the proposal in House Bill 1134 is really to extend similar treatment to that which is given to the Attorney General's Office for anti-human trafficking prosecution to anti-gang measures. In fact, Mr. Chairman, all but the provision concerning forfeiture, this is really just a copy and paste job from anti-human trafficking measures. And you'll see that this will just apply to the provision of OCGA 1615-4, which is the street gang statute. So there is not a risk of applicability in other types of crimes. This would only apply to prosecution of criminal street gang charge by the Attorney General's office. Now, a couple other important things for your committee to be aware of, Mr. Chairman, is many times gangs, it probably comes as no surprise to the folks in here, but many times gangs operate in a multi-jurisdictional fashion. So criminal street gang activity is not confined to the boundaries of one county or one judicial circuit. It can be prevalent with the same gang in multiple counties or in even multiple regions of the state. And as we've seen more and more of that, it becomes all the more important for a comprehensive response from state law enforcement to match the challenges that we're seeing from these gangs. Additionally, the local prosecutors' offices can many times face a large burden. It could be in the number of cases that are put to them from investigators, just the quantity of cases and the lack of resources to effectively prosecute those offenses. It could be because of a need for specific expertise. Maybe, for instance, there's a Metro Atlanta County that has specialized prosecutors in the area of gang prosecutions, but that might not be the case in other parts of the state. And the governor just talked about the fact that there were cases made in 100 counties of 159 counties in Georgia, I believe, in the past year of gang-related crimes. And so this is not just a urban, suburban, or rural issue. It's all parts of Georgia are facing gang crimes. And so the need to have either the training, prosecutors with the training and experience prosecuting these offenses, or just the capacity to handle the number of cases that are needed is, those are two reasons that collaboration is very helpful. I think I think that the recognition of funding as a component of this is important. I think we have to recognize that law enforcement is comprised of folks who have dedicated their lives, dedicated their careers to keeping us all safe. And that an important part of backing them up also includes appropriate and acceptable funding. The funding questions also don't just stop at prosecutors. We had great testimony in subcommittee about the need also for public defenders and appropriate funding for public defenders to ensure that the defense of these cases, once they're made, is there. And I don't disagree with that whatsoever. But I will say that the funding component has really been there and continues to be there in the proposed budget this year. And Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I'll just go into a little bit of detail about that. So the GBI I think recognizing Director Reynolds is a former DA of the Cobb Judicial Circuit. He, certainly has expertise in prosecution of major felony crimes, and many on his staff do as well. And so I think the circumstance was an acknowledgement by state law enforcement officials that a specialized unit to really investigate these crimes would be helpful in receiving reports, making cases, working with local law enforcement agencies. Maybe there's a city, county, police force, sheriff's department that needs greater assistance with these types of cases. So receiving those files, working them, being able to make certain determinations as to the appropriateness of criminal charges, that was acknowledged several years ago. And we have had funding in the budget for specialized gang investigatory unit of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Well, it would just seem then to be consistent that we have also corresponding to that prosecutors who specialize in these types of crimes on the state level, who are able to provide a response in a multi-jurisdictional fashion, who are not constrained to one judicial circuit, and who are able to support and back up local prosecutors where needed, or in the case of maybe bigger crimes, more widespread criminal offenses, being prepared to bring these cases, as a state constitutional officer, recognizing the concern and issues that we have with these types of crimes. I think that this discussion is an important one that we're having, and I know that the Chief Justice in the State of the Judiciary earlier this week talked about some of the challenges that continue to face the judiciary, as well as the great work that's been done. But I just think about a judicial circuit with a prison, maybe in rural Georgia. The prison is facing a significant impact, both due to the prevalence of gang membership within the prison system, which we've covered 14,000 members, approximately 30% of the state prison population. And then you put on top of that, approximately 21% of all persons in the state prison system have a diagnosed mental health condition. And I'm very grateful to the Speaker of the House for his leadership in addressing comprehensively mental health treatment and responses that we see statewide in Georgia. But what that really leaves you with, leads you to conclude that these local DAs need support. And just to kind of walk you through how this would work, what I anticipate would happen is either local investigators or investigators with the state. So it could be a GBI agent. It could be an investigator with the Department of Corrections who receives certain intelligence about certain gang presence, gang activities taking place, would be able to investigate that crime, would be able to make a finding, a determination as to whether there's probable cause, and would, through the normal route, really seek arrest charges and arrest warrant. But ultimately, that file would then be provided to the Attorney General's office. And that could occur where a local DA says, I need further support, need backup, request that the AG steps up to provide that. It could be that the referral is made directly from, I say referral, but it's the report is provided by in this example, the GBI directly to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General would then have dedicated prosecutors and support staff, including post-certified law enforcement officers, as referenced in House Bill 1134. And they would be able to adequately investigate the offense and to provide the alleged offense and to provide backup support, travel to, say, this judicial circuit that's very strained, be able to put on training, which I'm not saying they can't do already, but but I do think it's helpful to have context from prosecutors who are actually working the cases when you have CLEs and you have, discussions that occur between professionals that are prosecuting attorneys. In any event, this legislation is very important to our state. There's actually been an outpouring of support expressed to me, Mr. Chairman, about carrying this bill, and I'm honored and appreciate the support that's been received. There's a great letter actually in the folders from the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Says Metro Atlanta Chamber asks for your, I'll just summarize. Metro Atlanta Chamber asks for your favorable consideration of the bill. It provide prosecuting attorneys and the Attorney General concurrent authority to investigate and prosecute gang-related crimes. As a business community, we have become increasingly concerned with the rise in violent crime in Metro Atlanta and throughout the state. This bill would enhance law enforcement's ability to investigate and prosecute a driving force of crime in our region. And it goes on to say a multi-pronged approach is the best way to address critical issues like this of public safety, and equipping law enforcement with the resources needed to keep Georgia citizens safe is, of course, as we all know, an important thing. I would just, if it's okay, proactively maybe address some of the criticism, I should say, that was given in subcommittee.
Certainly, I want to just chime in before you do that and tell you I appreciate you bringing this legislation. This is important legislation, and I don't want to steal your thunder because I do want you to proactively respond to some of what we heard in subcommittee. But just from a practical perspective, the point that sticks out to me is that these gangs are operating in multi-jurisdictional. So if the GBI is doing an investigation up in Noonan, Georgia, and has connection with a gang down in Ware County, Georgia, neither one of these DAs are likely going to be talking to each other. So it would be a sort of one-stop shop for the GBI to go to the AG and be able to prosecute a concerted effort by those gangs all over the state, because the gangs do not see the lines of the counties or the circuits or the states for that matter. I applaud you for bringing the legislation. I think it's good legislation, and you may continue, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I completely agree with you. I may butcher some of this. We have some real experts on criminal law in the room who can correct me on this, but I actually think that maybe there are circumstances where not only not talking or the potential for lack of communication between the DAs would be an issue, but there may be relevant information as part of one case that really needs to be introduced in the other case. So I believe OCGA 244404 would allow for introduction of similar types of crimes that have occurred that might be related. They're not being prosecuted there in that courtroom, but it's related to the MO or similar intent, things like that that are as part of the criminal conduct of the person charged, and it's relevant for introduction. I think this just reminds me of prosecution of certain retail theft crimes where maybe there is retail theft at like outlet mall centers in different counties around the state. And I'm certainly not talking about similar treatment there, but those sometimes are noted, and a prosecutor may have to prosecute that offense in, for example, Cobb County and Fulton County and Gwinnett County and DeKalb County, because there's similar criminal offenses took place in different areas. The gang activity statute is, I think, particularly important to have statewide jurisdiction, because not only are we talking about relation to violent crimes, but we're also contemplating potentially gang activity occurring in multiple different parts of, for example, the Metro Atlanta area, and having one prosecutor who is able to prosecute each of those respective crimes, knowing of the investigation elsewhere, is incredibly helpful. Now, that's really important about getting to the truth of what's happened. And there's no erosion of the rights of the person charged. The circumstance is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. And I will also say, I think it's the most effective use of state resources as well, because you've got a prosecutor who maybe is very familiar with, for example, an investigator supporting the prosecutor as part of their staff, but is maybe familiar with this gang, for instance, and is familiar with the type of crime perpetrated. And that knowledge base is very helpful in providing consistency in multi-jurisdictions. So back to just addressing some of the concerns that were raised. So one concern that was raised by Representative Bodie was a duplication of state services in this regard, because the necessity for having law enforcement, post-certified law enforcement officers to serve subpoenas, to be present for witness interviews as investigators, that may be just done by law enforcement agencies, state law enforcement officers. And what I would just say is, I don't know if that's on the mind of any committee members here, but requiring that in our system, even a state law enforcement officer, like a trooper with a state patrol, a GBI agent, they're charged with really investigating, making a determination as to whether there's probable cause in the arrest phase to make a case. It's the prosecutor's job of evaluating the case for indictment, presentation to the grand jury, and ultimately trying the case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime was committed. And it would not be appropriate to ask the investigating agency to also fill the responsibilities that are left to the prosecutor's office. And I don't think there's really any dispute about the importance of the independence of those operations, so that a fair and independent determination can be made as to the necessity and importance of prepping the case for trial, for instance. And I mean, ultimately, the investigating officer is a witness in the trial as well. I mean, it would be highly unusual to have a witness in the trial also charged with, or a colleague of the witness at trial charged with serving subpoenas. Although that does happen. I mean, it does happen if you have, say, investigators who are fact witnesses as part of a case. The ultimate determination of whether to charge, though, is something that I think needs to be with an independent prosecutor's office. And so I think there's a fair and measured approach here. So secondly, I think the question has been put to me about how effective will this ultimately be? And the response I would give is that we have a similar unit in place for anti-human trafficking measures. Georgia has quickly become, I think, a really example nationwide of how to address the evil, heinous, criminal human trafficking enterprise problem. And the ability to have law enforcement officers make reports to the, for arrest reports to be provided to the Attorney General's office for prosecution in those areas is important. I think there's been success with our AG's office in that regard. It seems like we're seeing the great work that they're doing in the community and throughout the state on the media regularly. And we're talking about saving victims here. We're not just talking about putting the bad guys away. And so, I mean, that's profound. And I think we should all express our appreciation for the work that they're doing. I certainly will. But the question is, how effective can this ultimately be? And I was speaking with some advocates ahead of time who asked some great questions about, how can we track that? And I think that's a good question. I think that maybe that's something we need to continue to work on. I'd ask for no amendments here today, Mr. Chairman, but I'm certainly open to that. We need to know kind of where things are coming down, and maybe we can speak with the folks who are working in this area and get some stats, some data about, how these cases, what the disposition is, how many cases are coming in, where the resources are lacking. And that also goes, frankly, to the public defender's office as well, to make sure that we're tracking just what the obligation is on them as it relates to empowering the AG to prosecute these offenses. Resources has to be a part of the discussion anytime we're having these conversations. I get that completely, but also we need the underlying law to back that up and make that possible. I think that there was a question about, not to highlight the arguments against me, but I think that's helpful for your committee members, Mr. Chairman, just to hear about what issues were raised. There was a question as to, will the concurrent jurisdiction be a problem? That, are you stepping on the toes of any local prosecutors? I think that discussion is a fair one to have. I think that we heard from Prosecuting Attorneys Council that certain DAs will be supportive of this, certain DAs will not. And I respect that. I understand that completely. As a former prosecutor myself, I certainly understand when you're working a case, making a case, and either the federal government or, some other investigator agency comes into it, how's that going to impact the case? Or maybe I've made a decision on my own that I don't think prosecution's appropriate. And now is somebody else going to consider that? Well, I'd submit in this circumstance, we're not going to have problems in that regard as I see it. The recognition of the gang problem is one that does not lend itself to for lack of a better term, territorial type response. We're going to have, I think, local prosecutors, I expect, very appreciative for the state's willingness to provide trained prosecutors who can be there to prosecute these cases, who can back up the local DA's office and their staff, and to work in coordination with those local prosecutors. The collaboration, I think, is what is important to note. I think that is what we want more of in law enforcement. And I think that's what House Bill 1134 will bring. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I know I've gone on for a while, but I'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee or to hear any other comments or address any other issues that there might be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your testimony, and I think all of it needed to be said, and the ability to respond to some of the arguments. I think it was a fair analysis, and so I appreciate you spending the time on that. I do want to have a little levity and giving some input. And one of the arguments that we heard in subcommittee, it was sort of that it was along the concurrent jurisdiction argument, but it was, why do we need someone else prosecuting this issue? I mean, I would submit to everyone here that if it's what these gangs are doing, it's an illegal activity. Why is it bad to have another set of eyes capable of looking at it on a broader scale? And I know that's a policy opinion, but I believe that the more oversight for our criminal laws is a good thing. And certainly you mentioned that budget had to be concurrent with the conversation of enacting this type of law. But I think we've seen in the governor's budget, we do have that. We are budgeting for this task force. So I want to also put that on the record. You got a couple lights flashing. I'm going to go to number 5. Representative Gorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you also, Mr. Chairman, for the searching explanation of the bill. I guess just briefly, if I could provide a little bit of detail to sort of underlie my question. because there's some context, I guess, that goes into the bill. I think the committee is familiar with the correspondence from former Senator Jesse Stone, now, I guess, chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, who is now Superior Court judge in Augusta, I believe, if I've got that right. And wrote a letter to the Attorney General as well as several other prosecutors, expressing concern that if he didn't get some sort of a appointment for prosecution in certain gang cases by, I want to say it was like 60 days was the deadline, that by law, he would have to let some defendants in gang cases go free. And I don't know a whole lot about the backstory on that case, but what I recall hearing is that the local DA was conflicted out, which is something that can happen with some regularity all over the state. And I think we all know that currently the Attorney General's office has conflict jurisdiction. I want to say it's OCGA. I always switch the numbers between the dashes in my head. You search Westlaw and you're like, there's nothing there. I think it's like 15.18.5 or something like that, right? And there's three grounds that the Attorney General has for three options that the Attorney General has if there's a conflict. And one of them is to assign the case to an attorney in the Department of Law, which I guess just means the Attorney General's office. And as I understand it, the Augusta cases were pending for years, 5 years. And there are other cases in the state, maybe tens of cases, I think is the correct estimate, in the last few years, where DAs duly notified the Attorney General's office that they were conflicted out. And the Attorney General had the power in those cases under the subsection 2 or whatever to appoint an attorney from the Department of Law, or even under subsection 3, an outside attorney, albeit without resources. That is one hole in that statute, to prosecute those cases. So if those cases were pending for years, if we're made to believe that the Attorney General has the political will that the committee seems to assume to prosecute gang cases statewide, yet the Attorney General did not use that authority for years, I guess one question I have is, would you have brought the bill if it weren't for sort of the need that the Attorney General has right now to put into place new authority that looks like a solution to the Augusta problem, when in reality, that authority was already there to solve some of the more pressing cases and tens of conflict cases that are still around? I mean, I'm struggling to understand. I get that there's a voluminous case to be made for concurrent authority, but I'm curious if you would have brought the bill had it not been for the need to sort of cover, to be quite blunt, for the Attorney General after the Augusta situation.
Well, first of all, Representative McLaurin, I think some of your facts are wrong. I looked at the letter yesterday from Judge Stone, and it appeared to me that the cases referenced were not gang cases. They were just cases across the board, that the newly elected DA, I say newly elected, I guess it was at the end of, or it was in 2020, the DA was elected and notified the and made a determination there was a conflict of interest, which is appropriate, of course, for newly elected DAs to do. And what I heard yesterday, the testimony is that initially there was an inquiry into whether conflict counsel could be found locally, and that attorneys were asked locally. I don't have personal knowledge of what happened. I'm just discussing, and actually no one, and it's okay, I don't have a problem with this, but nobody came to me ahead of time to discuss this ahead of time. So I just didn't have a chance to look into it. But just based upon what I heard yesterday in subcommittee, I think that maybe what you just said deserves some context, which is number one, they are not just gang cases. They are what I would classify as more unique circumstances, a newly elected district attorney with a conflict. And after a searching effort was made in a relatively, very well populated county like Augusta, Richmond, conflict counsel could not be identified. And as a result, the trial court felt that it was necessary to issue that letter. Now, I also can't speak to the response. I think the letter wasn't even written to the Attorney General. It was written to Mr. Banks in the Attorney General's office. But I'm happy to maybe look into that and follow up with you. In my view, that does not really get to the heart of the issue we're talking about here, which is which I think you're agreeing with, the need for concurrent jurisdiction. More, it would go to the how is this is to current questions of current operation. And what I would just say is that it's my understanding that many times there are factors that go into a determination as to assigning new counsel. Potentially, it's identifying a district attorney from a different judicial circuit where you would seek to appoint them as a special prosecutor within the conflict, the jurisdiction to replace the conflict prosecutor. But potentially that's been happening. Potentially I have no firsthand knowledge, but it's very possible that they have been going through the process to get that done. I also know that COVID-19 is cited, regular around here, but the reality is that the inability to, the obstacles to having jury trials and to proceeding with bond hearings or, addressing cases has been, that's just been impacted. I think you would acknowledge that. And there's been legislation in response to that we've had throughout the Capitol. And so I don't know if that also has factored into the problem of, if that's factored into determinations as to the appointment of conflict counsel. I did when I heard yesterday that no other lawyer wanted to take it. I thought that was interesting because I've heard stories from back in the day where if the court told you you're going to be conflict counsel on a case, there was no, you didn't get to say, Judge, I decline. That was part of your responsibility as a member of the bar. So that kind of surprised me, but in any event, I'll be happy to talk to Judge Stone about this if he would be willing to. He certainly knows how to make his way around the Capitol here, and he knows how to contact me. So if that's an issue and he wants to talk with me about, I'm sure he will be able to do that.
And thanks for that response. I just, lest it be unobjected to, want to utterly shock everybody by saying that I don't actually agree with the need for concurrent authority. So, but I can see how the way I phrased my comment, that was the inference. But I think it is, there are obviously two discussions to be had. There's sort of what the bill does. It establishes concurrent authority. Is that good policy? And then I see sort of this other discussion over here about the impetus for the bill and potentially a political failure by the Attorney General's office as the reason for the legislation. But anyway, that's all I've got, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Representative Monahan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this bill. I feel like, as the non-attorney that's on this committee, or at least one of them, it's like maybe we get an honorary degree when we leave here or something from the Judiciary Non-Civil committee. And every time I'm in here, I write down a word. Today I learned what besmirched mean. So thank you, Representative McLaurin. I did want to mention something based on experience. I really couldn't tell you. I don't have any prosecutorial experience or anything like that, but I can tell you I've ridden and done ride-alongs with my local sheriff's department. And I live in Paulding County, so it's about 45 minutes from Atlanta. And I can tell you that when we rode out last summer, at the end of last summer, I got in the car with them. We started out at their meeting about 5:30 and rode out with them till 6 a.m. in the morning. And they said, Martin, if there's one thing that we need down there, they said it's somebody to help us with these gangs. We're covered up. When you said it's 50 to 60%, 70% is what they estimate the amount of type of violent crimes and drugs and all that kind of legal activity that's happening within Paulding County is from these kinds of gangs, and they need help. It was a cry for help. And so I have been just so happy to see you working on this legislation, to see the governor and his family and administration working on this issue, because with the right resources, and they told me this too, they said, guys, I was with Representative Gullett as well, and they said, guys, if we can have the resources, they will leave this county and they'll leave Georgia if we can start prosecuting them and getting them out of here. And why I don't want it to be any other state's problem, I don't want it to be Georgia's problem. So thank you for bringing this bill. It's much needed. It's a solution to a big problem. And I'm just proud to be able to be here and be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Montahan. I have no more flashing lights here, so there's no more questions. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I do have a question online. Computer audio. Representative Kendrick, if you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Administration, so to sum up this bill, it would allow more people to prosecute what we're terming as gangs, even though we know that disproportionately affects Black and brown communities of people who are arrested for gangs. So this essentially will give more people the ability to do those prosecutions?
Well, I disagree with the characterization. First of all, the Georgia Criminal Street Gang Statute is in code. I'm happy to go through the code in detail, but ultimately, prosecution for these criminal offenses requires specialized knowledge as it relates to information which is particular to specific to gang activity. And that requires specialized prosecutors who can handle those kinds of cases. As mentioned, the impact on the criminal justice system with respect to ensuring that there is, courtroom personnel, all folks, involved to ensure that we're not just providing additional prosecutors without anticipating work that's responsible for judges, public defenders I mentioned earlier, but I'm just trying to think of the folks who are involved in criminal process. We are not with the budget recommendations made. This is not. There's a sensitivity to the impact on criminal justice system when we empower concurrent jurisdiction. But I just want to make one other point, if I may, Mr. Chairman. And forgive me, this really doesn't go to Representative Kendrick's question, but I think it's important to note. I briefly alluded to this earlier, but this would only impact prosecution of the criminal street gang activities statute alone. It does not empower prosecution. Presumably be within the same indictment, they could prosecute, but it does not empower prosecution of non-criminal street gang activities. Charges. And so I would submit to you that it's limited in scope to the area where expertise is needed, and that that's why it's helpful in this regard. Thank you.
Representative Kendrick, did that answer your question?
No. So I'm really just, unless it's more nuanced than I'm missing, I'm just trying to see if more people have authority to prosecute cases.
The code defines what criminal, what is the term? It's a defined term is criminal street gangs in the OCGA code. It doesn't, to my knowledge, reference any ethnicity or anything like that. Representative Kendrick, you're my friend. That characterization is just I think there's no place here for that. This has nothing to do with that. I'd appreciate if you would rephrase your question if it's not been answered.
All I am asking, and we're going to differ on the characterization of it and what's appropriate, but the question is, will this bill allow more people to prosecute under the gang statute? Just more prosecutors in general. Since we're doing it concurrently, are we adding to the number of people that currently now can prosecute these cases? Are we adding to that number?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
you. We have no more questions. I got one flashing light. Representative Montan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you. We have no one signed up to speak. Where was this one at?
That was the secondary one.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take a personal point of privilege real quick before we get you. I appreciate that. We had this on the door, so that's the only one I had. While everyone's here, everyone's getting emails from our administrative assistant, and I want to introduce her while she's here so you can put a face with a name. Miss Deborah Basiles is in our office, and I may have butchered that last name. Give it to me one more time. You told me once. Barshall. This is Miss Deborah Barshall in our office, so everybody feel free to reach out to her. And I know it's good to put a face with a name after having all those notifications come from her. And we have our intern, Miss Nadia. Would you stand up? And Miss Nadia is from Georgia State, and I'm not even going to attempt her last name. She's told me multiple times, and I don't have it. I apologize.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nadia Abdurrahman. I am a political science major in Georgia State University. I'm a senior, and my concentration is international affairs. And I'm an intern with Judiciary Non-Civil.
Thank you. And everyone knows Mr. Brian Hines here. These are the guys that really make this work out here for us. So I appreciate their help and appreciate you guys coming in. Let me go to our witnesses. You guys come on up. Caitlin Barner and James Woodall with SCHR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee, and to the sponsor of this legislation. Thank you for hearing our concerns and being amicable to them. I don't want to rehash what we kind of talked about in committee yesterday, but I do want to frame the commentary in which I'll present today around the persons who are actually involved in what we're talking about today. When we talk about how do we solve gang issues, I've had I don't want to say the honor, but I've had the experience of living in a community that has had gangs. I've had family members who have been incarcerated on this particular question. My father currently is serving life sentences. And when we talk about how to solve this issue, you have persons who are committing crimes, because under RICO, you have to, it's not just violent crime, right? It's also, financial, it's also civil, it's also bodily injury, all those kinds of things. And so I recognize what Representative Kendrick said, but I want to be very clear that this is not synonymous with just African Americans. Like, I think that needs to be stated for the record. But in any event, when we talk about how do we solve this, it's important that we humanize the individuals that we're talking about in order to solve the issues at hand. And prosecution alone doesn't get us there. And I think every member of this committee recognizes that. And what we're looking at the Southern Center is ways that we can not only understand the people in which we're hoping to help, so that our communities can be more efficient, more effective, more comprehensive in the things that we do. But we have to understand why people are going to such extreme lengths to get to where they are. And I had the experience as a 8-year-old living in Clayton County, Georgia. And most people don't have a choice. And it's so unfortunate. And if we simply seek punitive responses to a person who literally has no choice but to go outside and join a group, we call them gangs, but it's simply groups, right, of people who collectively organize together. And some of them do criminal activity, some of them do not. But what we're looking to do under this legislation and ultimately under the RICO statute is to provide a response, a systematic response to be able to ensure that we are not allowing criminal activity to take place in our communities. And I think we all agree to that. And what we're simply asking for is a more comprehensive approach and address to why these persons are here, and looking at some of the community-based solutions that we can have that comprehensive response to address this. So we don't have to come back here in 2 years and give more money to the Attorney General or more money to GBI. So that's one. And the other thing is to the point about the duplication of services, if you will, and the effectiveness of them. We believe we need additional resources, right? Like, it would be better suited if we could give, and I know we can't afford it, or we just don't want to, but we could give the resources necessary to the local prosecutors and be able to provide the necessary prosecutorial kind of resource that they need to process those cases. However, nevertheless, I want to see if Caitlin, you have anything further to add, but I want to just add that context of how do we humanize the people to understand why they do what they do, and how do we get them to where we want them to ultimately be, which is community.
Ms. Barner, give me a minute to respond. Mr. Woodall, I agree absolutely what you're saying. Here in Judy Non-Civil, we're constrained to a certain topic, right? The reasons that these things are happening, that's not germane to my committee. But I don't disagree with you. I think that there needs to be a comprehensive approach to try and help before the problem becomes a problem. So I agree with you. It's just not in this committee. Behavioral sciences or something like that is where something like that would be taken up. And I want to commend you on your testimony. I mean, that was a well articulated point, and I appreciate you delivering like you did. And thank you very much. And I empathize with the position that you're in and position your father's in. So I appreciate you saying what you did and how you said it. Go ahead.
Caitlin Barnes with the Southern Center for Human Rights, working with James. I just wanted to sort of emphasize something that was already brought up by Chairman Estration, that we would certainly support an effort to study how effective this has been, both in terms of addressing human trafficking in the state, since we've had this expanded authority for the Attorney General's office for a longer time. But as we're continuing to expand authority for the prosecution and policing of these crimes, and we're really not seeing this, and I hear your point that this may not be the space to have that conversation in this particular committee, but in this building, in this larger body, that y'all are responsible as lawmakers for studying these issues, studying the impact of these laws, and coming up with solutions that are going to be effective. So just wanted to emphasize that we would be supportive of and exploring ways where we might be able to study how this is working out for us as we try to address these
I think we
issues.
agree entirely on that. And if you can find a sponsor and put some legislation together, I think that we would be, at least I would be, I can't speak for the committee, but I think Mr. Chairman Estration has said that he's also supportive of something like that. And I believe that is a laudable task, and we would support something like that. And I want to make sure that I'm clear in that under this gold dome, we are responsible for those other areas of subject matter, just not in this committee. So I appreciate y'all's testimony. You do have a question. Chairman Smith.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Brother Woodall, I appreciate y'all being here today and conversation y'all have brought about. Mr. Scandalakis made a good point in sub yesterday, and I appreciate the fine job he did in one of my circuits. I think that was before I started practicing, but he left it in good shape. The problem with gangs in our state, and we have several, and being involved in criminal defense work, It goes more than just the Bloods of the Crips. It's the Latin Kings. It's Ghostface. It's the Gangster Disciples, and there are different subsets of that gang, and some of them team up together. And I, even though I am sympathetic to the points that are made, here is one thought. As gangs move through jurisdictions in our state, it begs the question that I've asked myself, which is, are certain prosecutors not going to recognize some of these gangs, whereas the Attorney General and their office may recognize some of these gangs? And so the benefits to this legislation, if there's a prosecutor down in Blackley that hasn't run into Ghostface before, doesn't know what it means or what constitutes somebody being a member of this gang, doesn't know what to look for, which signs. There are signs that'll be posted in different areas, certain tattoos, of course. I wonder if this bill can present a much needed knowledge that you see coming from the Attorney General's office that could be an asset to these prosecutors. And I'll also ask you this: could it be that they also have the experience that they can provide these prosecutors in areas that don't know what these signs are to identify them? It, to me, looks like it could prohibit certain people from being prosecuted. And that could be something that the Attorney General, they come in and evaluate it, and their knowledge and expertise of identification of these gangs could be an asset, not only to the prosecution, but the discretion not to prosecute. What would you think about that?
Thank you, Chairman Smith, for that. The thing that comes to mind is, one, I don't know if there is anything currently in law that would prohibit that communication from already taking place, and concurrent jurisdiction. I mean, I don't know if that it really resolves that issue if persons are not able to, one, identify who these gang persons are, but two, where they are and how with the identifying factors. I don't know if the statutory authority is necessary for that communication to take place. Secondly, I would, to the point of a local prosecutor and not understanding who is in their community and what threats are pervasive there. I would challenge any prosecutor who doesn't know their community why they are in elected office, similar to any elected official. Because if you're prosecuting cases and you're seeing a common pattern, when I was in the Army, that's what we did. And that's the vocation. So I'll just say that there's issues happening, to your point, all over the state, and any leader, regardless if you're a prosecutor, regardless if you're a mayor, regardless if you're a city council person, you should be able to identify what's happening and come up with very creative solutions to address them. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, I think it is a very comprehensive approach. And there's already things that are underway, from GBI to local community organizations that are actively trying to engage this issue. So we're all working together, and we have to continue to work together to solve the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Woodall. Now would be the time, appropriate time for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to pass.
I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second? I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second? Any discussion from the committee? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Nay.
The ayes have it. Moves on the rules. Congratulations. All right. You're going to Zoom? I'm going to need you on this one. The next bill that we're going to hear is a Senate bill. It is Senate Bill 226. If I could get the author to come up to the podium here and this is a piece of legislation that has been, whipped to death in Judy Non-Civil. And so I am going to take we're going to limit debate here. Okay. We're not going to go into a significant amount of content because we have done that. And frankly, I don't want to hear it again. And if you are going to say something and it's not something that's already been said, please come up and say that. But if you're going to come up and regurgitate exactly what we've heard 6 times now, then we know we've heard it. And, this thing has been vetted and vetted and vetted. We've taken input from the interested parties. We've put this bill into a reasonable position. I'm not telling you to not come up and speak. I'm just saying, if you're going to say the same things, please be respectful of the time of the committee and the committee members, because I think every member on this committee would tell you, like, we are significantly under time constraints right now. So with that said, I appreciate the author bringing the bill, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Senator.
It's great to be here, and I will concur with everything you said. I think we've had plenty of debate on this bill last session and this session. I'm working from LC 480514S that passed out of subcommittee earlier today. Not to get too deep into this, and I appreciate the chairman and committees. I think additions and amendments that were offered into this version, I think addressing some of the concerns around copyright. I think some of the concerns or some tweaks that were needed in terms of the public participation process for parents. But I think this bill has come a long way. I think it's a good bill. And I think at the end of the day, it's giving a process for parents and guardians to address concerns related to material in a K-12 environment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any questions for the author? Again, this is Senate Bill 226 LC 480514S. This is dealing with obscene material in schools, outlaying a process for challenging materials and delineating the Supreme Court language as to describing what is obscene. I've got number 7 flashing. Representative Byrd.
Thank you again, Senator. Just curious, for a parent or permanent guardian, what happens if children live with grandparents, but they are not considered the actual guardian? I mean, I've been asked that. Okay, so maybe something has happened to a parent, I don't know, and a grandparent is now taking care of those children. So a grandparent who takes care of the grandchildren on occasion while the mom and dad are working, can that grandparent go through this process?
Not without seeking parental guardianship. Not
Guardianship approval. And there's several steps to that. I mean, not just from a judicial legal perspective, but also from a school district perspective.
Okay.
Now, Representative Byrd, if the grandparents are the sole legal representatives for the children or guardians for the kids, then yes. If they've gone through the process of being made that, then yes, they can.
So only legally.
Yeah.
If they are legal.
If they're legal representatives, yes, or guardians, legal guardians, excuse me, not representative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Kendrick.
I got it resolved. I just needed a copy of the last version.
Yeah. All right. I've got 2 persons that are signed up to speak to this bill. Have you got any new information to add? Mr. Taylor? Mrs. Cayenne, do you have new information to add?
Just a question. Just wondering if the spirit of the bill is going to be precluding taxpayers, residents of the school system.
The spirit of the bill, as I understood it, was to give parents the opportunity to come in and challenge material that their children were watching. We're not going to turn this bill into a weapon for every taxpayer to harass the school system. That is not the intent of the bill. And if that was anyone's understanding, that it was a misunderstanding as far as I understood it.
And I want to make one comment too, I think to that too, because I think this is specifically addressing material separate from this. School boards across the state, including I know the school boards I represent, have specific policies in place that allow anybody from the public to come and speak to the board. So I think if there's a general concern that's maybe not specifically related to a specific parent, family, classroom, the rules that they've promulgated at the local level may address if there's a broader community concern. But again, I think that goes back to the local school districts and their rules of engagement with the public separately that they adopt. And a lot of them follow the Georgia School Board Association templates in terms of those processes.
And this doesn't preclude them from doing that.
So a taxpayer could go to the school board, bring it up, and then a parent would make the appeal?
If the school board allows that, yes. The parent certainly can bring the appeal.
Okay, because currently I can appeal it, and I do like this bill because of the process codified in law being the school board as the final arbiter. That's very important. And currently I can appeal, but I won't have that ability if it's not my child. Or
But it doesn't, this doesn't preclude you from that. So if your school board wants to let you be able to appeal, then you can appeal.
okay, thank you.
Representative Smith.
Mr. Chairman, just speak to the taxpayer portion of this. There's some constitutional concerns with that and who is aggrieved by this infraction. And so, although I'm sympathetic to that, just with constitutional muster, were that to be added to this legislation when it goes over to the across the street over here, it puts it in jeopardy. So it's more of a constitutional concern and a nuance of understanding constitutional law. Just wanted to be clear on that, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Vice Chairman. I appreciate your input on that. All right. No other questions. If we have no other questions, now would be time for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion do
Motion.
pass. We got a motion do pass. We got a second.
Second.
We have a motion do pass. We have a second. Any discussion by the committee? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of passage of Senate Bill 226 LC 480514S signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
The measure passes on the rules. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, I appreciate your attendance. We're going to adjourn. I appreciate y'all. Thank you.